There was a single lamp in the corner of the room, and it was fighting against the dusk that was seeping in through the blinds. The room had a dim glow, the kind of soft glow that comes from light. Kelsea Ballerini was seen sitting on her couch with her legs crossed, holding a glass of rosé that was only halfway full, and her blonde hair was falling over one shoulder as if it was becoming too exhausted to remain in place. Upon placing her phone on the coffee table, she received a notice that lit up the screen. It was yet another text message of congratulations for her most recent nomination. He did not pick it up at all. Not at this time. Instead, she allowed her gaze to wander to the wall opposite her, where a framed photograph of her from her first Country Music Awards was hanging slightly crooked. The photograph depicted a younger version of herself, with wide eyes and a microphone in her hand, like if it were a lifeline. Putting her words to the test, she spoke out loud and said, "I've changed my relationship." They had the feeling of being true, but they also had the feeling of being heavy, as if they held the weight of every red carpet, every acceptance speech, and every hour that she had spent wondering if she was enough. But things weren't always like this. In the past, when she was a little girl from Knoxville who had a dream and a guitar, honors were the highest point in her life. A long road that was paved with open mic nights and rejection letters led up to them, and they were the dazzling promise at the end of that journey. She would sit on the floor of her bedroom, cross-legged, watching the Grammys or the Country Music Awards on a small television. She would imagine herself in the audience, expressing her gratitude to her mother, her admirers, and possibly even God if she could manage to speak without sobbing. During that time period, a nomination was more than simply a verification. It was everything. This was evidence that she belonged. When her name was called for the first time, she was so excited that she almost fell over her dress as she was walking to the stage. The intensity of the spotlight, the way her hands shook as she held the stage, and the way her voice cracked as she remarked, "I never thought this would happen to me," were all things that she recalled. It was accurate. She had not done so. On the other hand, once it did, something changed. Hunger did not disappear. Rather, it merely took on a different form. Simply being nominated was not sufficient. All of a sudden, her desire was to triumph. Moreover, when she had won, she desired to win once more. It was a cycle that she had no idea was going to happen, a treadmill that she was unable to get off of. After taking a drink of her wine, Kelsea allowed the chill to settle on her tongue before continuing. She reflected on the phone call she had received earlier that day, which meant that she had been nominated for yet another award. This time for Female Vocalist of the Year. Kelsea had just sat there, her phone clamped to her ear, feeling, what? Her manager had been overjoyed, and her publicist had already begun to compose tweets. It's not quite numbness. It is not ungrateful. Simply put, distinctive. "I've changed my relationship," she said, this time in a more subdued manner, as if she were confessing it to the room that was completely empty. She could still hear the echoes of the old Kelsea, the one who would constantly refresh the nomination lists, who would cry in the bathroom if her name wasn't there, and who would plaster on a grin if it was, even while the anxiety was eating her up on the inside. That Kelsea lived for the acclaim, for the gleaming awards, for the moment when the camera panned to her. And for the world to see her sparkle was something that she lived for. The question, "Who am I doing this for?" was something that she began to ask herself at some point in her life, possibly after the release of her third album, possibly after the divorce, or possibly after she turned 30. The music had been hers from the beginning. That particular aspect remained unchanged. She penned psalms as if she were bleeding, allowing the chords and the words to flow out of her until there was nothing left for her to conceal. Peter Pan, Miss Me More, and Half of My Hometown were portions of her soul that were raw and authentic, and she had gone to great lengths to ensure that they remained that way. How about the awards? Who were the nominees? Those were held by a different individual. They belonged to the industry, to the fans, and to the version of Kelsea Ballerini that the international community desired for her to be. She had spent a considerable amount of time attempting to be that girl. Just right. Finished with polish. One who is overly grateful. On the other hand, she had grown weary of it. It's not that I'm tired of the music. I'm not even close to being that thing. Having grown weary of determining her value based on a ballot or a statuette. Because she was sick of the way her heart would leap at a nomination, only to crash when the night came to a close and she was back in her hotel room. Alone with her thoughts, she became frustrated. After placing the wine glass on the ground, she bent forward and took her elbows and placed them on her knees. Her thoughts kept going back to the announcement of the nomination. It wasn't the words themselves that she recalls, but the sensation. Certainly, there was a glimmer of pride, but it was not quite as raging as it had been in the past. On the other hand, there was something more consistent and less noisy. Despite the fact that she was proud of the work she had done and the lady she had become, she no longer required a trophy to convince her that she was proud. It was the second time that she declared, "I've changed my relationship," and this time it felt like a promise. It occurred to her that she might give her mother a call, or perhaps she might phone her husband, Morgan, who would be flying somewhere over the Midwest by this point. He would understand it. It was always the case. After a long night of drinking whiskey and strumming guitar strings, he had once relayed to her that the music, and not the gear, was the most important thing. The tone of his voice was low and confident when he remarked, "You're already winning. Every time you take the stage, you are engaging in this behavior." There was a time when she did not believe him, but now she was beginning to do so. After spending an excessive amount of time hunched over her notebook, Kelsea rose up and stretched her arms above her head. She was aware of the pain that was developing in her shoulders. After making her way to the window, she moved the blinds aside, so allowing the remaining rays of sunlight to break through. The metropolis of Nashville, which had provided her with everything, including dreams, heartbreak, and a place to call home, stretched out below her. Song by song, she had constructed her life in this place, and the nominations were but a footnote to the story she had created. It is possible that she might respond in this manner if they were to inquire about it on the red carpet this time. However, rather than the typical, "I'm so honored" spiel, which she was in her own way, she said something that was genuine. She would tell them, "I've changed my relationship with all of this," and she would mean it. At this point, it is no longer about winning. It is relevant to the work. These are the individuals who are able to hear it and experience something. At that moment, she would most likely chuckle since the cameras would lead her to feel anxious, and she had never been very adept at concealing her anxiety. She then switched her attention to the guitar that was propped up against the wall and allowed the blinds to fall back into place. It was the same one that she had carried from Knoxville all those years ago, and it was damaged and battered. As she sat back down on the couch, she picked it up and allowed her fingers to locate a chord to play. A smile appeared on her face for the very first time that day as the sound, which was both warm and comforting, filled the room. I was pleased with the nomination. There was a pleasant hum. Nevertheless, this peaceful moment, this music that was solely hers, was the thing that were of significance. For her to understand it, she did not require a stage or a spotlight. It was not necessary for her to have a prize to demonstrate her success. It was true that she had altered her relationship with the prizes. Nevertheless, what was more significant was that she had altered her relationship with herself. It was then that she realized that the true victory had been achieved. As the notes began to stream out into the night,